Mike SB's episode drops this Monday at 10 a.m. Certainly an episode to watch out for. The individuals that I spoke to this week start with a few fellow fans and friends to Mike SB. I followed a majority of these people through Mike SB and his posts, so big shout out to Mike SB. All of his content will be listed in the description box of Mike's podcast that will be dropping on Monday. Now, the first individual that I spoke to this past week was Mason Wheelock. Another, as I mentioned before, Mike SB fan, also ran the Adventure Brand Fest, which was initially one way of how they connected. He's also an avid dirt biker. That's what he was doing this past week himself on vacation. And along the same lines with that Adventure Fest, he also runs a brand called Adventure Brand. So this is definitely a lot of interesting stuff, not just as an artist, but also from the clothing and event sector. So we spoke for about an hour and 40 minutes. We got real deep. I really wasn't planning on posting this podcast, but I got to be real with you guys because I feel like that's the only way that I'm going to come across genuinely is if I am putting out those, seemingly embarrassing moments. So if you want to go see, some of those embarrassing moments, definitely check out Mason Wheelock, which will be episode 8. Now, along this same theme, we also spoke to another fan of Mike SB, Guap the Guru, as well as someone who's local to him and one of his artists, Go Metro. So this was the 9th episode and the first episode that I did a dual interview, something that I typically don't like doing because, people tend to speak over people and, just being on the phone in the first place and not being in person, it's a little bit of a challenge, but Guap and Go Metro really made it a great experience, very insightful, very analytical. I also got to speak, which I'll get into next week's who I spoke to this past week, but I had an individual interview with Go Metro, so we kind of go a little bit deeper into his own history, and he also speaks about the crime rate that is just rising increasingly in New York, coming from the Bronx. Definitely a very interesting story that Go Metro has. And I also have Guap later today. I'm going to be having his individual interview. Just very great guys. Spoke about their project that they worked together with, as well as who Guap surrounds himself with as far as visual artists and other producers. And one thing that I wanted to say about Guap is that his content is very unique. He is a true musician, bringing out the keyboard, bringing out guitars. He has a lot of different elements, so certainly check out all of his links down in the description below, and that'll be the dual episode for episode number 9. Now we're moving on to number 10. The third person I spoke to this past week was a local individual that contacted me, said that he had a budget that he was wanting to promote his project, and I offered him to come on the podcast, talk a little about his project and his own experience growing up and becoming an artist. So definitely look for Payzant or Payzant over the next couple weeks, and that'll be episode number 10, and I'll also list all of his information down in the description below. So he's a local guy, Now, moving on to the fourth, Kyle Kendricks Maxwell. Now, Kendricks is his profile that I got introduced to. He actually got introduced to me through Yali's page, so big shout out to Yali. Worked with him on an interview as well as some little music video promo style things, and it was really a great opportunity to get to chop it up with Yali. And Kyle, aka Kendricks, was also a big fan of Yali, so we connected through that. And he also had commented on my Leaving College Beats video, and now I'm back, so I reached back out to him, had him on the podcast, and he went really into detail, similar, background where, he did come from the trap and had a change of life, and it really developed over amount of time. That was something that took a lot. It took, a specific change in his life when he was sitting with his friend at a gas station, that there was a individual that had been smoking or just, didn't really look like they were going anywhere in life, and they kind of had an epiphany that if they continued doing what they were doing, that they would end up exactly like that man. So at that time, he had a big realization that that's not what he wanted his life to turn out to be. So he created a handful of different brands, including Heart of Music Entertainment and Vivo Media. So certainly stay tuned for Kyle, quote unquote, Kendricks Maxwell. Has a handful of artists, creatives, entrepreneurs. He has some great quotes. I believe sometime last week we talked about if you have to fall in love with failure. I really like that quote that I'll list up on the TV right here. You win once, you fall in love with losing. That is so important, that you have to take losing as if it's a part of the process. I've gone through several businesses myself, several business partners, so Kyle really brings an interesting perspective to the table. So definitely check out his links that will all be listed down in the description below, and he is episode 11. Now, moving on to the last episode, the last person that I spoke to over the phone is Carl J. Now, he's an artist, originally from New Jersey, came to California, lives on Hollywood, and we spoke about different potential internship opportunities in film. He also is very proficient in After Effects, which is something that I highly, highly admire. My computer can't handle it. He said that he uses an Alienware, so he kind of goes into the technical specifications that you need to become a proficient After Effects user. So that really is something to consider while you're looking at this content, is that if you yourself are a producer and could gain from all of this experience, certainly check out Carl J's information down in the description box below. But not only does he moonlight as a visual effects artist, he also opened for Chief Keif a few years ago, and we didn't really go too deep into Chief Keif. Maybe that'll be the topic of the second podcast. And as I wrap up this past week, I'm starting to have repeat artists, athletes, and others on the page. And if there's any specific individual that you want to hear more from, if you have any questions that you would like me to ask them, please list them down in the comments below. Every like, every subscribe, every follow that helps us grow the platform. And that only benefits you, that if you're an artist or you're an entrepreneur or you're trying to promote yourself, please reach out. That if you haven't, subscribe. And if you don't already know, this was Anthony Marshall. And as always, we'll see ya.